Hello, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. My name is Lisa Rainey, and I'm the Director of Business Development with Operative IQ, Narcotics Tracking, Inventory and Asset Management, and Fleet Maintenance Solution. We are so pleased today to present today's 12 for 12 Client Success webinar with Justin Reed and Cy-Fair Fire Department. First, some housekeeping tips. We wanted to let you know that we have almost 400 folks joining us today, so we've muted all lines for attendees. Please let us know if you have any questions by using your chat feature, and we'll get them all queued up and make sure that Justin's able to address them at the completion of his presentation. We have left time for Q&A, and we also wanted to let you know that Justin is available to stay after the entire allotted 60 minutes should there be lots of extra questions. The other thing we wanted to make clear is that the recording of today's presentation will be available in your Operative IQ Knowledge Center for current clients. But if you're not a client, you'll also receive the recording in an email following today's session. So please know that the information will be available to you, and we're just thrilled to have you here. So a little bit about our presenter. Cy-Fair Fire Department has been an Operative IQ client since September of 2014, starting with the Inventory and Asset Management module. They added the Narcotics Tracking module in November of 2016, where they opted for on-site training and system optimization at that time and had some great results with that. Justin had joined the organization in July of 2016 and has had an incredible impact on their narcotics tracking journey and success. So without further ado, I am honored to introduce Assistant Chief Justin Reed of Cy-Fair Fire Department.
Howdy, everyone. Thank you guys for showing up for this. I hope it'll be valuable for you. You can at least take one or two things away from this. I'm going to throw a lot of material at you guys, and so if you want to take notes, please feel free to take notes. But if anything, try and pull just one or two pearls out of this, and this will be successful for all of us. So I'd like to start out with the quote that we have. So the diversion of drugs from health facilities is still vastly underreported, right? And the easiest way to take that is, right, drug diversion is happening nationally, and we need to put things in place to be able to mitigate and minimize that. And so I'd like to share some ways that we went about that. So a little bit about myself. So I am the Assistant Chief for Cy-Fair Fire Department. I'm the EMS Director, and like Lisa said, I've been here for 3 years now. On the 25th of this month, it'll be my 3-year anniversary. I'll throw in the disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of myself and do not necessarily represent official policy or position of the DEA, DOJ, Cy-Fair Fire Department, or Operative IQ. Also, I would like to throw in that I am a sleep-deprived father of a 1-month-old. So any typos that happen in here or any of my TIA moments, please excuse those, and let's not talk about those if you ever see me in person. And of course, there's a picture of my beautiful little man and my baby girl, Claire. So some of the objectives. So our objectives today, we'll go through a little bit of introduction about the department. I'm going to do a quick user process overview just to give anybody who's not familiar with the system just an idea of how it works. Kind of talk about some of the problems that we identified when we were looking at designing a solution. The PDSA cycle that we should have used. I'm going to tell you we didn't do this the best possible way, but I'll share with you some ways that we probably could have done it better so you don't have to repeat our mistakes. Currently what we're looking at, and then I want to finish with the current DEA regulations and what those look like to us. And another thing that I really think will help a lot of people is the electronic 222 or the CSOS. And then we'll finish up with questions. And like Lisa said, we'll have plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. So a little bit about us. So we are northwest of Houston, inside the county. We cover a population of about 550,000 people, 160 square miles, with a call volume just shy of 28,000. We are an EMS-based fire department. I kind of use that tongue-in-cheek, but for those of you that have met me, I like using that. We're not fire-based EMS, we're EMS-based fire. We have 13 MIC units that operate 24/7. About 150 employees. Our medical director staff, we have a board-certified emergency medicine physician, as well as an associate medical director who is board-certified emergency medicine and is also a fellow in EMS medical direction. So fun department, we're growing, we're having lots of things, and this is just one of the things I'd like to share with you. So next we'll get into, it's going to kind of come pretty fast, but this is going to be a screen recording walkthrough of what operative IQ narcotics tracking looks like from the end user level. So as a paramedic, when you're going to transfer drugs from your possession to your release possession, what does that look like for you? So here we are. This is what the process looks like. So currently you see Justin Reed has these test diazepam in his possession in that box ID of 866. We use that as our shop number. So you're gonna click transfer. We've got those drugs queued up. We're going to transfer those drugs. I'm going to transfer them to my relief, who's sitting in front of me is Bob the Builder. You can tell I've got a 4-year-old. And so we're going to confirm, make sure everything that I say is there, make sure that he sees everything that he says. We're going to select shift change and input it. Everything that we do requires a password and PIN for both users. I recommend not saving passwords and PIN so the crews aren't pencil whipping this. Hit submit, and now that's recorded. So now it's recorded, and if you guys want, you can even from this dialog box have it email, supervisor or district chief, or hey, just hit OK, and that's going to save in the system. So now I've switched over to Bob the Builder's view, and so now Bob has these drugs in his possession and is able to run a call, and he actually gave that test diazepam 168. So now he's going to do an administration form. Simple as click on it, hit the administration form, enter how many milligrams he gave of the medication. See, it auto calculates your waste for you. We require a date, our case number. This allows us to tie this drug back to a patient without having any sort of HIPAA violation. Hit any comments that are in there and submit it. Again, every step in movement of narcotics or tampering with a narcotic, touching it digitally somehow requires 2 people to verify it. And we just require their partner witness it. Again, from here, hey, if you want to make sure that your supervisor knows that this was given so they can keep tabs on it without having to get into the system, you can email that PDF straight from that dialog box. It removes it from Bob's possession so he doesn't see it anymore. And that's it. So it's a fairly simple process to work through this, and then you can do the same thing in reverse to be able to transfer at shift change. So that gives you a little high-level overview of what it looks like down to the end user. So now let's talk about some of the back-end stuff and the management and kind of where we came from, why we decided to do what we did, and where we are today. So our problem when we started this was kind of twofold. One was on the DEA compliance side, and the other was on supply management. So from the DEA compliance side, in 2017, we had 11 stations. We had a single distributorship here at the office that received narcotics, and then we would have to 222 the Schedule II drugs to the individual stations that were all listed as mid-level providers. So they all have their own DEA registration number as a mid-level, keep their own supply, keep their own tracking. And on top of that, having a distributorship here at the office, we had to do ARCOS reporting. And so you can see, especially being on pen and paper, how complicated and complex the system and just all the different points of failures. From a supply management side, again, we're on paper forms, just ripe for error. There's no ability to reasonably conduct an audit that would not require removing FTEs from the office or from the field for multiple days to be able to conduct a true audit. We had high overhead costs. Like I said, we had 11 mid-level stations that all required the same PAR. And so we had a lot of waste, a lot of cost. And as you guys know, currently in the environment we're in with all the drug back orders and everything, that's not something that's conducive. If we can artificially inflate our numbers by eliminating those stations, much better. We had to balance the diversion dichotomy. I'll use this dichotomy quite a bit, as we have to balance it. It's always a balance. If you put a process in place that all but eliminates diversion potential, it may become so cumbersome that your field staff aren't going to manage their patients and aren't going to treat the pain and think just because you've made such a cumbersome system. On the other hand, if you make it so easy, you're never going to catch that diversion. You've got to find that balance. And then finally, it was just an overall inefficient system coming in, trying to figure out where we are, what we have. And so we had to come up with a better solution. So here's our, just again, high level overview of our before versus after. So before we had a single distributorship with 11 stations, 11 mid-levels, and an additional mid-level here at the office. Okay. With our change, we're now on a single mid-level license. We've dropped the distributorship. We just have the single MLP that we have to manage. Before, we were on paper tracking. Everything was, the forms would change, the forms would get outdated, the forms wouldn't be filled out completely. It was just entirely too cumbersome. So now we are digital and we are cradle to grave tracking. I mean, the second that narcotic hits the door until it is disposed of somehow, whether that's administered, destroyed, we can track that, and I can in an instant jump into it and figure out where that narcotic is or where it's been. We had a massive amount of supply that turned into a large waste for us. Now we're running a lean, efficient system that it always needs some tweaks. It's never going to be perfect, but it's efficient. We had low accountability. It was difficult for me to see any trend at the user level because I would have to move paper forms over to an Excel spreadsheet, again, points of failure. And now we have increased accountability and we have quick, easy audit control. So for those of you guys that aren't familiar with PDSA cycles, what we did was it was an improvement process. We're going to go from a current system that was working, albeit not the best, and we were going to improve it to hopefully hit all those points that we talked about. So if you haven't heard of it, what I'd like to introduce you to is called the PDSA cycle. So it's plan, do, study, act. Anytime you're going to embark on an improvement process, you should use the PDSA cycle. And so how did that look for us in our quality transformation, and how does that look to us today? So the very first thing we needed to do was we had to plan. We had to figure out what the problem was, research the options, and design the solution. Those are in that order for a reason. Normally, the catchphrase is, oh, let's start with the end in mind and work backwards. That's fine, except for we're dealing with something that's extremely tightly regulated, and we have limited systems to be able to do that. So really, you got to figure out what your options are, and then design your solution around that, right? Unless you're in the business of being able to create your own software and create your entirely new process, that's fine, more power to you. But we're all underworked, underpaid, overworked, underpaid, and understaffed. So we had to go with something that we knew was working. So that was our planning process. We evaluated multiple solutions, and the solution that we settled on was Operative IQ because we felt like we already used their system, and on top of that, what they brought to the narcotics game really was above and beyond anything that was out there. So next, we stepped into the do process. So we engaged Operative IQ. We elected to have them come in and sit down with us and help us design our system. And what was fun about working with them is a lot of times you'll get software that they bring the software to you and it can do everything. And stepping into that, if it can do everything, if you're not familiar with it, it does nothing because you get vapor locked from all the choices. So they sat down with us and showed us workflows for each step of the process for a generic EMS system. And then what we could do is we could take that and say, okay, that's great for an administration form, but in our system, this is what it needs to look like. So engage your vendor and then break the system. Break the system means figure out what your workflow is, and then take the lowest common denominator in your department. When I say that everybody should think of 1 or 2 people, engage that person, bring them in and have them step through it with minimal training and see, because we're in the system, we're designing it, we're working with Operative IQ, things become intuitive to me that I won't necessarily explain correctly. And so by bringing in that outside perspective with just a little bit of training, that's reality that's going to go out into the field, and they'll help you break the system and design a better one. So the next we got to train, and training is important. Do not assume that they're going to think of it, right? Same way that we adjust our patient care guidelines. We got to think to the lowest common denominator. We have to train to that so that we're not assuming that they're in our heads thinking what we're thinking. So train on it, provide handouts, and then do your implementation. With your implementation, have resources available to them that they can refer back to, because there's lots of things that are going on. There are people that don't pay attention to the training, and you want to do everything that you can to avoid that 2:30 in the morning phone call. Hey, Chief, what am I supposed to do with XYZ? Well, you should have something that answers those questions, a frequently asked questions page, something like that. One thing I'd like to share with you in our training is this one's free, so it's not as fancy as the other slides, but I just wanted to show this to you. So the bottom piece there kind of shows this is a PDF that we made for them. And that screenshot, the easiest way for you guys that aren't familiar with building this is, if you're using a Windows-based computer, use the snipping tool. The snipping tool is a lifesaver for plagiarizing things. Don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. And so I show you there up top the icon for it. And again, this is free, kind of separate from the DEA discussion, but the snipping tool, if you just go into the search function, type in snipping tool, it'll pull up, and then right click on it, hit pin to start menu, and I promise you're going to use it all the time. It's super nice because you can just draw a box around an image and then paste it right into a PowerPoint or a Word document, and then keep doing that. You can even highlight over it, things like that. Again, that one's free. Back onto the presentation. So finally, we studied it, and we did our planning process. We did it. So now we need to study it. What I encourage everybody is address your blockers. Okay, so things that are preventing the process from working, major high-level issues, you've got to address those. When they're minor issues or annoyances, hold off. Because a lot of times, and I say usually it's 3 to 6 months, especially with a major process like this, hold off for 3 to 6 months. Take those, listen to your crews, get their feedback, but tell them from the very beginning, hey, these minor annoyances, we're going to address those in about 3 to 6 months. Because a lot of times what happens is they're complaining about the change and not really about the process. So let them learn it, let them understand it, let the new wear off, and then go back and study it, and then reevaluate it. Once you reevaluate, now you're going to act on the study that you've just conducted. You're going to audit your process, and you're going to stay in this cycle of PDSA in every improvement cycle you do. It's continuous improvement. And then finally, you want to engage others. One of the ways that this 12 for 12 actually came about was Lisa and I were hanging out in DC, and I was sort of commiserating with her about back order issues that we have. And so here we actually, we had a back order issue with a medication, so we extended the shelf life of it for 6 months. And I was like, it was a controlled substance, and it was complicated. Everything in the system had to be reversed. We had to, physically and digitally extend the expiration dates. It was complicated. And she was just kind of looking at me smiling. I was like, what? She's like, there's a much easier way to do that. And I was sort of guilty of sitting in my own little silo thinking that this was a unique problem to me, and I didn't engage other people. And Lisa, sure enough, had a way easier way to go about doing this. Unfortunately, we had already went through it, but next time we have that problem, we're going to engage her for sure. So here's what our solution looked like. Our solution on the DEA compliance side, it was sort of serendipitous that the Protecting Patient Access to Emergency Medication Act was passed about the same time we were doing this in Q4 of 2017. So that helped us. So we actually transitioned to that single DEA license, one mid-level, no more ARCOS reporting, all that good jazz. We also switched to digital 222 forms. That is for your your Schedule 2 drugs, so fentanyl, morphine, any other Schedule 2s that you carry. You don't have to do that paper form that one vendor will tell you to fill it out this way, the DEA tells you to fill it out this way, and another vendor will tell you to fill it out this way. If you miss one box, then it gets kicked back. The digital 222 form is the way to go, and I'll show you in a little bit what that looks like. So then on our supply management side, having a digital system is amazing. I despise paper. You can ask anybody that's in my office, don't bring me paper because I will lose it. If it's digital, I can refer back to it and find it. We had cradle to grave tracking. The cradle to grave tracking gave me, as the chief and as the person who signs off on that DEA license, that peace of mind in the middle of the night that I'm not going to freak out waking up saying, oh my God, we're missing narcotics. A digital cradle to grave system allows you to identify your outliers. You can benchmark these things. You can take reports from the operative IQ system on the administration side and actually throw it into Excel, download QI macros. It'll make it that much easier for you, and you can identify who your outliers are. We're minimizing our diversion exposure. Again, like we said before, it's not if diversion is happening, it's who's diverting. The DEA will tell you, typically it's going to be your mid-level managers, and it's always going to be the person that you would least expect. And then finally, my boss, my board, they love it. They say I like to spend money on everything, which is kind of true. But ultimately, this decreased our costs significantly, especially in our overhead cost. So that's kind of where we are, where we went. Again, with the old process that we were on, everything was paper, everything was archaic. In this, 3-month, 6-month process for us moved us into the 21st century. And I would like to say that it was easy and we did it perfectly. There's a lot of things that we could have done differently, and I'll talk about that at the end in the lessons learned slide. So the next slide I'd like to get into is a little bit about the Controlled Substances Act and where we were and where we are today in July of 2019. So the Controlled Substances Act was established in 1970. Most of you guys should know this. Gives you power, the government the power to regulate substances of abuse, gave instructions on their maintenance and their use, but it lacked direction for EMS. It lacked direction for a lot of medical specialties that manage these, but specifically, let's talk about us, back to us. So because of that limited guidance, we kind of did what we do best in the field that we're in, and we interpreted it the way that we wanted to, which was fine for about 40 years. And then a few high-profile cases started making their way into the DOJ, and they were interpreting it and saying, actually, we were in clear violation of the Controlled Substances Act for a variety of reasons. Kind of the easiest one to throw out was the Controlled Substances Act said to prescribe or administer a narcotic, the physician had to write a prescription for it, and you could not do that delegated or on standing orders like almost everything that we do is. And so the feds came in and said, essentially, we were in violation of federal law. They weren't going to enforce it, but they were giving us notice. So that's when a lot of people, for us specifically, when I talked about how we have the distributorship with all the individual mid-levels, when that chatter started going on about 2011, that's when our department decided, hey, we're going to, as best as we can, follow the letter of the law. But then they were getting to the point where they were going to start enforcing that paramedics had to one-for-one prescriptions and narcotics and have online or physical presence of a physician to be able to administer the narcotic. And as we know, pain management's one thing, but in life-saving management of a status patient, we've got to be able to get that benzo on board, and we don't have time to be able to call or, just transport the patient and let that happen at the hospital. So that's where we introduced the Protecting Patient Access to Emergency Medications Act. It's long. I probably won't repeat it again, but just so you guys know, that's the full letter of it. Feel free to Google it. It'll give you some more information. It was introduced by Representative Hudson out of North Carolina, had bipartisan support, and it was also pushed by NAAMSP, NAEMT, NASIMSO, International Association of Fire Chiefs, and many others. It failed in 2016. It was reintroduced in 2017 and passed unanimously. And so what this says is essentially, as November of 2017, when it was signed into law, it kind of says, hey, let's do things the way that we've been doing and set things out very generically. So I'm going to speak to probably 80% of the people who are listening and the providers that are out there. There's some nuances as you get bigger and you cross multiple states, you're hospital based. So this is just the bulk of it. But essentially what it says is you need one mid-level license per state. That's it. So if your agency crosses state borders, now you get into, a little bit of nuances. You need to have two. But if you're just operating in the state, you just need one mid-level. It is your responsibility. Once those narcotics hit your station, it's up to you to manage. What the DEA is going to say, there's a few things, as far as safe restrictions, the size, how long it takes to tamper with it, things like that. They'll spell that out. That stays the same. But audit control, they want an inventory every 2 years at either the beginning or the end of your business day. Well, that's not going to work for us. So what they say is follow industry standard best practice. And a best practice are unique individual control numbers, cradle to grave tracking, digital system, things like that, clear SOPs. That's what you want to go for under this. But the nice thing is we don't have to have all these different mid-levels, distributorships, and all that. We can have one single for the entire state. Okay. And then finally, we can administer controlled substances on standing order. So it's not a change for us, but it's it's backing down from that scare that we had, which was we were going to have to be online to be able to give any controlled substance. So here's kind of our before and after. So before you needed, not saying that everybody did this, but you needed a DEA license for every storage location. And I'll get to in a few more points, a storage location actually included a parked ambulance. So now they just say, hey, single mid-level DEA license per state. The management of controlled substances greatly varied from region to region. Depending on which office you called or depending on which state you were in, it really varied. So now the DEA says it's the agency's responsible after they receive it and follow state law. Some states do actually regulate what happens within their state, so you still need to follow those. These are just federal guidelines. Before, it required a physician prescription, technically. Now you can administer on standing orders. Before, they technically weren't allowed to be stored in vehicles because those were unregistered sites, and now you can store them in unattended EMS vehicles as well as attended EMS vehicles. And there is really no guidance on diversion control. Now they're telling us, hey, follow industry best practices. Well, who sets those? We do, right? We set those, and we need to come together and we need to talk about what those best practices look like by attending things like this 12 for 12 and sharing our stories, sharing our failures and sharing our successes as well. So hope everybody's still following along with me. We're going to get into a little bit of a complex system if things weren't already complex, and that is the E222 process. So for anybody who's actually tried to enroll in CSOS, it may be a little bit overwhelming, so let me simplify it for you. This is not the end all be all. I'm just giving you an example or a best practice that I would say to do, okay? I tried to build this slide and it was getting extremely nuanced, and I was like, you know what, this is a best practice deal. Let me just say, in Justin's opinion, what the best practice should be if you're going to enroll in CSOS, which I absolutely think you should. So when you get on there, they have 3 different forms you can fill out, the 251, 252, and 253. And when you read the way that they read it, it doesn't talk about EMS, so it's difficult to interpret. So what I would say is start at the 251 form. And so the 251 form says, I'm a small agency, I'm the chief, my name is on the DEA license, and I'm the one who orders the narcotics. Perfect. I need to fill out a 251 form because I'm the primary DEA contact, and I'm going to sign the paper 222s, and then I will do the electronic 222s. So you fill that form out, go through the process, and now you can electronically order 222s. You cannot delegate this. So you cannot give your password out to somebody else because that will absolutely violate DEA. So then what I say is, even if you're a small agency, we got to have a backup, right? 1 is none, 2 is 1. So we got to have some sort of redundancy. So that's where a coordinator comes in. So that's step 2. So you've registered as the registrant, you've got that, you can order narcotics, but now you need a backup, right? God forbid you go out and get hit by a bus. Somebody needs to be able to get narcotics to you. So let's register a coordinator. So that's DEA form 252. They are approved by the registrant, and they're an alternate personnel. You can use them as the primary, right? Functionally, they're the ones that are ordering it, but you can only have one per registration number. And so that's what I would say. Again, this is nuanced. There's other ways to do this. This is just what I'm saying is a best practice. And finally, if you're a larger agency, consider doing the power of attorney, the Form 253. So this is approved by the coordinator. Coordinator's approved by the registrant, so it trickles down and just gives additional support. An example would be, a purchasing agent. So they're the one who's actually going to get the invoice, get the PO, and you know what? You want them to be able to push it and not have to come back to you to sign the form, and you're okay with that? Perfect. Then register them as a POA, and you're good to go. You're unlimited on those. The 251 and 252, you can only have one of each. Okay. So you figured out who you want to do it, you figured out your form. Once you download the form, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's a little bit archaic because they want to make sure you are who you say you are, because there's a lot of power that comes with this. So you're going to take that packet and you're going to mail it in. So you mail that into the DEA. They've got a quick turnaround time, and then they're going to do a two-step authentication process. The first is they're going to send you an email, say, hey, we got your form. Here's the email you put on the form. You're saying you are who you say you are. Now wait for the snail mail. So then they're going to snail mail you step 2 of the process. Once you get that, what you're going to do is you're actually going to take the code that comes in that snail mail, follow the email instructions, and you're going to activate it. And so what you're activating is a digital signature certificate. There's different browsers that you can use. They recommend Internet Explorer, Firefox. Again, best practice for sake of simplicity, use Firefox. Okay. And as you go through that email, follow the steps. I don't care if you don't feel like you know what this is or you feel like you've got this, follow the steps. Do not step out of line. Their steps are very intuitive and they're very clear. Follow those steps. Okay. And as you're going through that, remember, there's only one signature certificate per computer. Don't try and make a backup. Don't try and put it on multiple computers, one per computer. And that's where you're going to order your narcotics from. So every time you order narcotics, you're going to go to the vendor's website. For instance, Boundtree Henry Schein, you're going to go to their E222 portal, put in your information, and then it's going to look, their system is going to look onto your computer and say, hey, where's this digital signature? And that digital signature is going to validate, virtually who you are who you, and you're authorized to order that, and it'll let your process go through. That cuts down your ordering time significantly, especially in back orders. If you guys are monitoring the FDA's emails, oh, fentanyl went on back order. Oh, I need to get my orders in soon, so all the other agencies don't steal my fentanyl from me. So this speeds up that process. And then finally, let's talk about some lessons learned. Like I said, I've kind of quickly gone over high level. I really want to save time to open up more for Q&A dialogue instead of just showing you, hey, this is what we did, this is how great we are, get that dialogue going. But here's some lessons learned for us. We definitely didn't do this the most ideal way, but in hindsight, I can recommend these. Engage your vendor early. Don't suffer in silence. Engage your partners and talk to them. But also too, it's engaging outside your agency and figure out what other people are doing and what you can adopt internally. Second would be build, test, and break your workflow. Don't assume that your first workflow is going to be perfect, right? It's good advice for everybody, right? We're not as smart as we think we are, and we're not as important as we think we are. So if you go into every project thinking that, you'll engage other people and come out with a better solution in the end. Don't think that your solution is going to be perfect, because I promise you, you didn't think of every angle. Train and provide resources to your staff. That kind of goes back to building your own workflow. It may make sense to you, but it may not make sense to your staff. So train them and give them resources. Resources avoid those 2:30 in the morning phone calls. Have a place to go. What you want to say is, hey, did you check the members web and this form, because it's clearly on there, right? Punt it back to them, decentralize it. Be flexible, avoid playing whack-a-mole. Whack-a-mole is addressing every single issue that comes across your desk, right? It's inefficient, and typically you're addressing the wrong things because you're hearing a complaint about the change, not about the process. And finally, balance your diversion potential exposure. We're never going to eliminate it. For example, I know agencies that require you can only pull up what you're going to administer. Everything else stays in the vial and you don't waste. Your waste gets sealed up, comes back to the office, and then they test it with reagent strips for dilution and things like that. It's cumbersome, and honestly, if I'm the one that gave it and sent back the vial and it comes back diluted, I may not have been the one that diluted it. And so, right, so you've got to figure out a system that works for you and minimizes your diversion potential. So if and when something comes to light, the DEA comes to investigate you, you can say, look, I was doing everything I could within my power, within reason, to balance the diversion potential. So finally, I want to, so here's my contact information. You can feel free to drop me an email. I am going to share the documents with Operative IQ, our SOPs, or workflows, things like that. If you would like those documents, please reach out to your Operative IQ agent and they can get you in touch with those files. Also, there's my LinkedIn. If anybody's on LinkedIn, I don't really do social media other than LinkedIn, but feel free to reach out to me any other way you would like.
Thank you so much, Justin. We'll go back to that slide you were at for just a second. I hope everyone who has joined has found this as informative and helpful as we have. We do want to get started with some questions. The first question that was asked by Kevin Howry is, will this be archived for further review? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can have access to this presentation. This audio and visual recording will be sent in a follow-up email after the webinar later this afternoon. So you can access it by clicking on the link there. It also is available for Operative IQ clients in your Knowledge Center for access anytime you'd like to see it. The next question that came up is for Justin. It's Alan DeFaus. Can the end user restock on their own, and what are the options for that?
So again, I'm going to give you just what our system does, and we do not allow our end user to be able to restock. Just for example, our workflow looks like our supervisors carry tag boxes. They carry a large quantity in their district chief vehicles, and we have our restock set up 1 day a week. So they're Mondays, and they go around. We have minimum PARs. So for example, so we carry 15 fentanyl. We carry 6 Versed, 6 Ativan, and 6 ketamine. Your minimum PAR is a third of that. So throughout the week, you know, if you're operating and you've got 4 Versed, you're fine. The second you hit 3, it sends a notification to the district chief and they can come restock your box. But otherwise, we let everybody fly till Monday and they go around and hit all the stations, no matter what their PAR is, and up them from there. So it doesn't allow for the end user, because for me, that's that balancing diversion potential. I would not like my end user to be able to restock.
Awesome, thank you, Justin. And just to follow up on Justin's comment, within the narcotics tracking module of Operative IQ, if your organization does allow an end user to restock, you do have some options as you set up your, specific workflow, whether it's picking up restocking substances from a safe, or picking up from a supervisor, or a supervisor restocking. So the ability to get restocking accomplished in Operative IQ is there's lots of different options to explore. But again, to tag along with Justin's sentiment, I think making sure that it fits your needs best with keeping everyone safe and making sure the best practice for your organization is key. So the next question that came up, and I hope that answered your question. If there's ever any follow-up questions, please feel free to chat those and we'll make sure to get them addressed. The next question for Justin is, if we're registered as a mid-level DEA, do we need the medical director to still sign the 222, or can the EMS chief on record with the DEA for the mid-level sign the 222?
So again, I will go back to my disclaimer. The way that I interpret it, and specifically in Texas, is the DEA doesn't really care about who our medical director is and what their DEA number is and whatnot. What they care is that I have a provider number with the state. So when I registered my mid-level DEA license, what I inputted was my provider number. And what they said was, if you have a provider number, then we're assuming and assuring that that our state has blessed us, and they're not going to get into the business of regulating that. So if I have a provider number, then I'm good. I put that provider number in. I put my information on the mid-level license, and then I sign the narcotics. But we did prior to our transition and the Act of 2017, we had our medical director on the license, and he was the only one authorized to sign the 222 forms. And since then, we have transitioned. Again, that's for Texas, and that's my interpretation.
Thanks, Justin. Matt Concialdi, if you have further questions, please let us know. Hopefully that was helpful. The next question from Scott Dorsey: do you order the CSOS as your agency or through your physician?
So again, actually, that's a good segue from the other one. So again, we're agnostic to the medical director. Of course, our medical director receives reports and things like that, but we order as an agency. And so so I'm the registrant. I filled out form 251, and when I fill them out, I'm filling them out as the agency, not necessarily as the medical director.
Great. Okay. And this question from Brandon Hill: how receptive are the crews to tracking narcotics through the Operative IQ system? It seems very cumbersome to have to log in every time they use a narcotic.
So, right, it's a balance. And initially, of course, they were opposed to it. But what was, I guess, helpful to me was our system was so archaic, they would take anything over what we currently had. So I was kind of blessed in that system. But honestly, it's not that bad, right? They had to sit down and physically write each controlled substance number down at shift change and things like that. They're already in check sheet because we use check sheet in the morning. And so what we tell them is, hey, you just get in there and you bounce it over. What I found, the crews that dislike it the most are the ones who pencil whip the transfers, because what it technically requires, right, there's always ways around it, is those crews to be face to face. One thing, kind of to your point, that I didn't touch on in our PDSA cycle, so we originally used fingerprint readers for the verification process, and we rolled that out and then quickly found that was an issue. The technology failed, and we didn't actually have a backup process, which was manually inputting PIN and password. So we temporarily said, hey, let's learn the manual process and we'll reintroduce the fingerprint scanner. And then what we found from our crews were they actually liked the manual process and disliked the fingerprint reader. So we pulled the fingerprint reader, right? That goes back to, just because I thought it was a good idea and it minimized diversion potential, it had to balance the risk versus reward on that. And so hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because really you're just replacing you're electronically replacing the logbook. So, whether they do it after a call as they're charting, you're giving them a way to electronically capture what they would be doing on a logbook anyway.
One more point to being cumbersome on the crews. One of the limitations is the narcotics can only be in possession of one person. So if you run dual medic trucks and both paramedics can provide the narcotics, you run into a little bit of an issue. But what we say is the narcotics are responsible. One person's responsible for those narcotics. And by inputting the run record ID, it doesn't matter who actually gave it, because that's what I'm really going to go into if I have an issue with, a med error or something like that. And so then in there, I'm going to find who actually administered it. And that's how we'll do that balance process.
And that's a really good point. With chain of custody, there's only one person that's ultimately responsible. Now, you can transfer from person to person where necessary, but to Justin's point, if he has another document to kind of tie those two paramedics together on that shift, then you're all good. You just need to know what happened. One other point to that is with the verification method, if scribbling a signature on a logbook is good, then verifying it electronically is better. And whatever means it is that works best for you, whether that's PIN and password, whether that's biometric fingerprint scanning, or whether that is a digital signature on screen on your smartphone or tablet. Those three options, you can choose your primary and your backup method. So whatever is best for your organization, again, you're just more secure and a whole lot more legible than a scribbled signature in a logbook. So thank you for that. Next question is from Joseph Zalkin. 1 DEA certificate per computer. What steps for additional approved user systems, i.e. logistics, workstation, and operations chief?
So I'm assuming you're talking about the CSOS and the electronic 222 form. So with that, it is sort of it's individual specific and it is computer specific, because that digital certificate gets installed on that physical computer. So that's when you would need the power of attorney, right? So if you mentioned a few additional people that you would like to have that ability, those would be the power of attorneys, right? So you would have 251 or 252 form. I don't want to get into the nuances. You don't actually have to have both of those, right? So say you just have the 252 form, the coordinator, and you've got purchasing, quartermaster, logistics, 3 other people that realistically today can order Schedule 2 narcotics, then they all get their own 253 power of attorney form, and then you go from there, and then just install it on their individual workstations and order it.
Perfect. The next question from Anthony Tucci. How do you handle Ativan?
Carefully. So with Ativan, right, so our Schedule 2s and then our 3s and 4s, we handle differently. Our 3s and 4s, we track in Operative IQ, and with tracking them in Operative IQ, that satisfies our DEA requirements. On the old school pen and paper form, we actually just replicated the 222, and that's how we tracked our Schedule 3s and 4s, our Ativan, Versed, ketamine. And so now having everything cradle to grave tracked in Operative IQ satisfies the DEA requirements, and that's what we go with. Currently, we don't have any Ativan, so that gives fun times of Versed for everybody.
Tony, I hope that answered your question. If not, please do follow up with another question. And so the next question from Samuel Benson is regarding your implementation loop. What metrics did you use to measure success?
So the most important, well, there's a handful of them. The most important measure of success for me was crew feedback. So I can get into the nuances that I can sit down with the board and say, hey, here's our cost savings. Here's where we were before in waste. Here's where we are currently. Here's our dollar figure savings. But really it came back to, I wanted things to be easier for the crews. I wanted life to be simpler for them, and I wanted them to not have as many barriers to providing the best patient care they can. And so it was solicitation of feedback. So engaging them with a questionnaire. And so the way to do that is, especially in a PDSA cycle, we got to know where we are to know where we're going. So we send out a review and say, okay, currently with our system, what do you feel about this? You can use a 1 to 5 scale. There's lots of ways to do it, but solicit that feedback from your crews and then establish your benchmark. So for us, our benchmarks are 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years. And in our PDSA cycle, that's where we do our studies, is at those moments using that real-time feedback.
Awesome. And the next question from Gabriel Gray, where do you put daily NARC checks, that first website shown? And I'll just address it real briefly and then hand it over to Justin. When you're tracking the movement of your substances and complete chain of custody, the transfer is a great place to start. So when they're receiving a transfer, it is an opportunity to verify that everything is there. There are additional options, for example, a box audit, auditing the things that were put in your possession. So there are a variety of different options, but I'm going to hand this over to Justin so he can answer you directly.
So let me get back. So there, I'll just, oh, actually that's a administration form. Let me jump back to the video. Hopefully it won't play, or I can at least stop it to show you. So this is, okay, I don't think it's playing. Perfect. So this is my view. My view is a little bit different. And in the cruise view, really all they would be seeing is the My Control Numbers tab that's at the top. And then they're going to see the Administer, Transfer, Incident Report, and Print. And so for their process, once they have the narcotics in their possession, they can either go straight to the URL or go in through check sheet and then narcotics, which gets them to this page, and they can see what's in their possession digitally. They can do an audit, go through there and verify them. Another way, we don't currently do this, but you can tag your boxes. So if you have, say you've got fentanyl in one box, and then you've got Versed and Ativan in another, and then ketamine, so you've got 3 boxes, you can tag them, and all they're reporting is the tag number. And once they break the seal, then they go through and verify it. We go through a lot of narcotics, so we choose not to do that. I hope that answers your question. If we get a couple more, I can actually log into our system and kind of show you Bob the Builder's view.
Sure, that might be helpful if we have time. So the follow-up question from Tony Tucci with Ativan was in regard to expiration and backstock.
So in regards to expiration, so what we use here currently to manage and mitigate our, the national issue of backorder medications and supply issues is I can share this as well. So the IOM, the Institute of Medicine, actually put out a strategy for managing your backorder issues, and we follow that with a few adjustments. So everything in there is labeled. With first is kind of like a notice, hey, this is on back order, really no change, we're just letting you know we've got plenty, but hey, FYI. And then it steps through a process of, okay, you can, limit the use, or you can compound it. So for instance, right now we're using compound ketamine because we couldn't get ketamine, and we use it for quite a few things. And so we use compound ketamine. So that's step 3 in our mitigation strategy. One of the last steps is actually changing concentration. And so like with Ativan or Versed, there's various concentrations that are out there, supplies. And so that's a very last step. And right now, currently with Ativan, because we have Versed, we've actually chosen, we could reach out and get it compounded, but it looks different. We necessarily can't get it in the same concentration. So we've chosen to eliminate it so we don't introduce more opportunity for error. And if you guys wanted to see what that form looks like, because we use it for epi, bicarb, everything that's on back order, I can share that step process.
Great. The next question from Shane Baird is, can biometric identification be used instead of usernames and passwords, for example, fingerprint scanners? The answer to that is absolutely yes. The third option is now digital digital signature. It would require a PIN to verify because we really want to keep that as secure as possible in the verification process. Do you have anything additional to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, we bought, I don't even know how many. We have 21 units plus additional. I mean, we have probably 40 of the fingerprint readers. And after we did that, okay, let's switch back to the manual process. We just never re-implemented them. So they're kind of sitting on the shelf collecting dust if anybody would like them.
And it really is a unique, situation to determine what fits your needs best, because that biometric fingerprint scanner does need to be plugged in via USB port. So it may not be ideal if you're using a smartphone, an iPhone, an iPad.
Yes, let me clarify that. The reason we're not using them is because it didn't work with our system every single time we needed it, because we do things a little bit different here because we're in Texas and that's how we roll. But yeah, that was just your mileage may vary. You may love them.
Right. And there are some folks that strictly use just biometric fingerprint scan for that extra level of security. So it really is your choice. All right, so the next question from Chevis Galat is, Chief Reed, are you prepared to discuss your department's narcotic audit process? And more specifically, does your department do random audits or of the system overall?
So we do. So Chevis, thank you for the question. We do a couple of things. So we do a monthly usage report that goes to the medical director so they can actually see it and they can chime in if they see something that's sort of out of the ordinary. We do a weekly audit. So before the crew member actually gets restocked by the district chief, they have to do an audit process. And so they go through audit, make sure everything that's there. And then afterwards, at the next shift change, we require them to do an additional audit. And then from there, we have reports set up so I've built a report in Operative IQ that emails to me. I then take that and I have it already built into Excel with QI macros, and it does my standard deviations and it shows me who my outliers are. So then we can go in and actually audit their process and figure out why are they an outlier. and go through there. So that's, a few of the steps that we do with our audit process. We also conduct quarterly audits, which is a full system audit. So everything pauses, there's no restocking that's done. Everything gets audited, and we, virtually and physically verify everything is where it says it is. And then with our destructions, we make sure that those are everything's been accounted for, because with a digital system, you have the ability to get a little bit lackadaisical, and sometimes you can have some errors that are just from 2:30 in the morning restock, and so that's why we go through there and do those quarterly full system evaluations and then document them in case the DEA ever comes in and wants to review our process.
Great. Next question from Dave Bile is, how does the system monitor wasted controlled substances?
So specifically, when I hear waste, I think like an administration waste. So Operative IQ, actually, when you receive a narcotic in, you're telling it, hey, I've got Versed, it's 5 milligrams per milliliter in a 2 milliliter vial. So I input all that information in, and then now when it gets a unique control number, as you can see on the screen right here, that 5 milligrams per ml, it knows. So all the user does is hit administer, put how many milligrams they gave, and it auto calculates my waste. And then my waste is signed off on my process throughout that. As far as waste when it comes to destruction of medications, so there is a destruction box and there's a destruction process where, as say for example, something was dropped and it was broken. What they'll do is they'll actually do an incident report on that, take a picture of it, package it up, bring it back. If there's still medication in the vial, then that goes into our destruction box, a virtual destruction box, and then a physical destruction box. And then we send that off for destruction just like we do all of our other controlled substances.
Great. All right. Let's see. Sorry, I lost my place on the questions here. There was a question that I was just looking at. Let's see. Got some takers for your fingerprint scanners.
Perfect.
Yep. We'll reach back out to you guys. And Scott Dorsey is asking, can you share the IOM link?
Yes, absolutely. So the IOM document that I have it's just a PDF. And so if you want to drop me an email, I'll get back over to that. I can share with you. We have an SOP, and then hold on, let me get to it. I'm trying to do too many things at one time. So what you can just drop me an email or hit me up on LinkedIn, and I can share it there. And so what we did was I'll give you the original IOM document, and then I'll give you our hybrid of it, as well as we do a posting that goes on the trucks, and it goes on all the supply room doors that says, hey, this is sodium bicarb. It's currently in this phase of mitigation, and this is what we're doing. So I'll share all that with you guys. Absolutely.
Perfect. Now there's two questions. I'll address these real briefly and then and pass to Justin for any follow-up input. Samuel Benson had asked, in a single medic system, how do you do a second signature? For example, a second signature may be a hospital RN. So the answer from the Operative IQ perspective to your question, Samuel, is that you get to determine which transactions require a single verification or signature or fingerprint scan and which require dual. So in the situation where you're administering and you need someone to witness, verify that you did what you said you did, you can determine if that has to be a known person, meaning another Operative IQ crew member or user in your system, or if it can be anyone. And if you choose that it can be anyone, it can be partner agency on scene, it can be the ER nurse, it can be really anyone you choose, because it's just like they signed on the logbook as well. So that one I wanted to make sure we address. And to follow up with Tony Tucci's question on Ativan, and I apologize, Tony, for not looking a little bit farther down the list, but in regards to expiration date when entering upon receiving due to refrigeration, pulling it out after with a different expiration date. We had this conversation yesterday with another agency out here, and what an option that you can do in Operative IQ is you can edit those Ativan if you're tracking them as controlled substances in narcotics tracking. And as you edit that expiration date, it does show up in the history of that substance. It's logged, it's captured, it's verified, so that you can kind of add a reason as to why you've shortened that expiration date, because I know once you've taken it out of refrigeration, it does limit the usage time. So I'm going to pass this over to Justin for any additional input.
Yeah, so specifically on the refrigerated drugs, so we're getting ready to bring them online. So we're going to have refrigerated narcotic safes in all of our units. So we'll use the current system that we have, and then we'll have an additional refrigerated safe. In that safe that's where our Versed, our Ativan, our Rock, our Cardizem, our Ansef, some of our other refrigerated medications go in there, and then we'll have a narcotics box as well. When the narcotics get received, because we do have multiple refrigerated drugs, those go into their own refrigerated safe that's still DEA compliant, so that we're across the board on that.
Perfect. Question from Simon Vaymond is, hi, how do you process or track the remaining on the vials when not used 100%? I'll just address this real quickly. If you do have either a multi-use situation or a situation where the vial that is has been administered but is not quite empty needs to come back into the management side of things, where you can go through reverse distribution that way, there is a trigger that you can set. There's a toggle switch where you can say, hey, I want those used vials to still stay in the system and not be electronically removed from that person's box, so that they can bring it back into the safe, unload it from their possession, and you can handle any of that additional waste. So if it's other than that, question-wise, Simon, please do send another question in so that Justin can handle that. But there is a method in Operative IQ to make sure that you can track, any of the not disposed of in the field bottles that are coming back, or vials that are coming back. And the next question here, I have my medical director on my registration. When I submit a new 251, do I need to pay a new registration fee?
So let me repeat that. So your medical director who is registered. Yeah, so your medical director, just kind of speaking out loud, so your medical director is the one who's actually registered with the DEA as your mid-level, which is fine. So he is then the registrant on the 251 form. You would want to, if you would actually want to do the electronic 222s, then you would do the 252 form, because you would then be the coordinator. Right, when I kind of stepped through that process, I gave you an example. It gets pretty nuanced, because, and if you liked what I said earlier, then feel free to stop listening right now, because I'm going to confuse you. The registrant doesn't have to have CSOS access. The coordinator would be, like, if you're not going to do anybody else, the coordinator would be the primary. So you can have a coordinator without a registrant as far as CSOS is concerned. And so I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, if you want to order them, but somebody else is on that, they will have to, bless you on that 252 form. You would be the coordinator, and then you can order them.
Great. Next question from Ronald Morris. Do you have units that don't have face-to-face relief? And if so, what do you do in the system for that?
Perfect. Great question. So we kind of got we were novel with our solution on that. And the way that we did it is, so all of our units maintain narcotics, even our reserves at our warehouse. So what we did was we created a separate virtual safe, which is the warehouse safe. And because in the hierarchy, when you set staff up, I don't want anybody to be able to see our main safe, right? Because that means they can mess with stuff there. So we give everybody access to the warehouse safe, and then I'll switch back to it as I'm talking. And then what they can do is they can return so they have drugs in their possession under my control numbers, and then they select their drugs like they're going to do a transfer at shift change, but instead of transfer, they hit return. And then when they return, they're actually going to return it. It'll bring up the option. They're going to return it to a safe. And so then they drop it off at that safe, and they do it, then their partner witnesses, and now those drugs sit virtually in that warehouse safe. So if, for example, I'm in shop 866, my truck's going off for PM. So I come up here, I physically and virtually drop them off at the warehouse, and then it goes and does its thing. I get into a new unit, I pick up from the safe. I'm getting into Medic 521, which is shop 863. I just go in there, pick it up. They come into my possession, and when my truck's ready, I go back, drop those off, and pick up the new ones.
Great. And another option for that is if you do secure those boxes on your vehicles in a Knox vault, you can absolutely let that box remain in the prior crew's electronic possession. And it basically says that was the last person responsible for each of the substances within that box. And then when the next crew come on, you can give them the option to, with a single verification, pick up possession of that box, thereby changing the custody from the prior shift to their shift as well. So there are some flexible options, and your Operative IQ account manager will give you access to those phone numbers. They'd be more than happy to walk you through that process as well. The next question is, what is the downtime procedure if you're unable to log into the system?
So that's fun. We recently had that issue while I was on vacation, and I had the luxury of logging into the system and kind of fixing it. So what we do is, if for some reason there's an issue, just like we have, right, the whole 1 is none, 2 is 1, just like you have backup PCR forms, we have backup narcotics tracking forms. And once we're back online, we then do an incident report for all of those narcotics. So say, the view that I have pulled up here. So say all those test diazepam were in somebody's possession during a system failure, and now we're a day later, we've got to pick back up. So what I'll do is the crew that's now taking them into possession, we'll do an incident report on all of them, and either digitally attach the manual tracking form, or we'll just say see document number XYZ, and that'll reference back to that document. A lot of times, if we have just an intermittent, one of the big issues we actually have is, say there's an emergency and a crew has to leave before they can actually do a transfer, then our district chiefs and a few other people, myself as the registrant and our coordinator, can actually go into the system and with another person verifying can actually pull those drugs from their possessions and then give it to the person that should have it. So that kind of helps that. And by limiting it to a few people, it doesn't allow crews to, hey, I'm out of here, see you later, and then, oh, we didn't transfer drugs, I'll just pick it up from you. So that's why we do it that way.
Great options. So the next question from Carol Gupton is best practices to witness waste. The question being in Operative IQ or in the EPCR or both?
So I would say that waste is probably going to be one of the biggest liabilities we have when it comes to the DEA coming in and auditing you. You need to be very specific in your procedures and in your documentation of how you document waste. Your mileage is going to vary on how that actually looks. What I suggest is you set a clear SOP, SOG that says if there is waste, it has to be done in the presence of this person, the partner. It has to be disposed of in this specific place, and then it's documented in Operative IQ. And then you can document it in your PCR, but I would say honestly, in the note section of the administration, you can just, that form that I had up, you can customize that, and you can just put a custom comment box that says, describe the waste procedure, and it'll say, okay, well, I am Bob the Builder, wasted this narcotics into the sharps container, and then the syringe and vial went into sharps container. But again, it's going to be heavily driven by your SOP and your SOG, and that is going to be a big liability. So make sure that one's pretty ironed out.
Okay, great. So thank you all so much for all of these wonderful questions. I know we've gone a little bit over today, but if there's any additional questions, feel free to let us know. Just as a reminder, yes, this presentation will be available. We'll be emailing you a link to it, so that makes it a little bit easier. And just to kind of wrap up before we let you go on with your day, Justin and so many of our valued clients provide so much insight through these 12 for 12 webinars. The next one is going to be in August, and it's going to be focusing on inventory management, using an electronic check sheet, some best practices there. We also do have for our existing clients our Engage User Conference. And so on our events page, You can not only sign up for the next webinar that's coming up, there'll be a link to it in the email that comes out with your webinar link to view this, and you can have a link to sign up for the next one. But the Engage conference is an awesome way to network with your peers, get best practice advice from them in a great positive environment where you're learning a lot of great skills and techniques to bring back to your departments. So to wrap things up, again, we so appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Any of our account management team would love to speak with you if you're not currently an Operative IQ user and you'd like to get some additional questions answered for your service. If you are an Operative IQ user, of course, we would love to hear from you as well. Your thoughts, what's working well, where we can best assist you. And most importantly, we so thank you for your time, Justin. I appreciate you putting this amazing presentation together.
Absolutely. I hope I'm probably disappointed on a big stage for you guys, but thank you for at least hearing me out and staying through this. Again, I love sharing what I have and look forward to people being able to reciprocate that. If you guys have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me, and I look forward to seeing you guys around at conferences. Feel free to come up.